In today's show, we're going to talk about the power of walking to help optimize fat loss and help to improve your body's metabolic health. We hear a lot about metabolic health, the high prevalence of poor cardiometabolic health amongst Americans. Some 94% of US adults have some degree of poor metabolic health. That includes increased waist circumference or belly fat, reduced post-meal glucose responses, and increased levels in triglycerides in the post-meal window. And a researcher who I'm quite fond of by the name of Edward Coyle at UT Austin has published a series of randomized clinical trials that I think are quite interesting and very relatable for everyday people who are trying to optimize their body composition like yourself, lose belly fat, and support metabolic health. And essentially in these studies, what they do is they randomize people to one of three different interventions. One group only walks 2,500 steps per day. That's the low activity, I think, in the screenshots that you will see in the breakdown of this study. In the moderate physical activity group, they have people just do 4,000 steps per day. And in the high activity group, which I don't think is that high, they have people walk 8,400 steps per day. Now, what they do after subjecting these individuals to either really low step counts, moderate step counts, or high step counts is after 2 days of doing this, they give them a standardized meal to see what happens in the post-meal window. They also measure proxies of fat oxidation, and they look at post-meal glucose as well as post-meal triglycerides. Now, triglycerides are very important. As you probably know, triglycerides are an independent risk factor for heart disease, as well as a good indicator of metabolic health. We talk a lot about glucose and hemoglobin A1Cs and HOMA-IR scores and post-meal insulin, but triglycerides really tell the story because as you become more insulin resistant, arguably the first biomarker to increase even before glucose is blood triglycerides. So looking at your blood triglycerides, and generally speaking, I like to see these under 60 milligrams per deciliter in a fasted state and under 140 in a post-meal state. And as we've talked about in our blood work masterclass, it's good to get a fasted baseline level of all of your labs: glucose, insulin, hemoglobin A1C, triglycerides, ApoB to ApoA1 ratio, which I will link in the description below to the blood work cheat sheet that you can print out, page 1, go to your doctor. We also have on there fibrinogen, C-reactive protein. There's a few other biomarkers that I think are particularly important in addition to liver enzymes. And essentially, after you get your fasted labs, you can then do a non-fasted panel and look at your non-fasted triglycerides. And when I say non-fasted, this would be eating a meal you habitually normally eat. For some people, it might be oatmeal and protein powder, or yogurt and oatmeal, or 3 eggs and maybe some avocado. Whatever a normal meal that you eat, you want to test your non-fasted triglycerides and glucose and insulin and have that blood work done about 2 hours after eating that meal to see where your triglycerides are at, which is exactly what these investigators did after randomizing people either to only walking 2,000 some odd steps per day, 4,000 or 8,000 steps per day, and looking at what happens in the post-meal window. And here's the appraisee, the high-level overview. When individuals only walk 2,000, I think it's 2,400 steps per day, for just 2 days, there is an 18% reduction in fat oxidation and up to a 30% increase in blood triglycerides after a standardized test meal when we're comparing the low step count group to the high step count group. Now think about this over the course of a week, a month, a year. If you're only walking 2,400 steps per day or just 4,000 steps per day, you are having a significant reduction in your total fat oxidation, as well as an increase in your blood triglycerides. And we're going to talk about the ramifications of that and what this study found in just a moment. But as always, if you're enjoying the content, hit that like button. Thank you for subscribing and being here, enjoying these videos. We're big fans of exercise, and that's why over at Myoscience, we created the only high-potency creatine enhanced with electrolytes. This is a great intra-workout or pre-workout tool that can help you support healthy hydration during these hot summer months, but also support your sports performance. Creatine is one of the most widely studied and safest ergogenic aids on the market. And there's over 850 reviews on the novel creatine enhanced electrolytes by Myoscience, which you can check out in the description below or by going to myoscience.com and using the code podcast at checkout. So getting back to the study, super interesting findings that after just 2 days of just 2,400 steps per day, fat oxidation decreases by over 25%. Triglycerides increase in certain instances, and it probably depends upon the meal composition that one eats. But in this study, there was a 30% increase in the area under the curve of triglycerides when just comparing individuals who have a low step count versus a high step count. Now, this is really important because a lot of people, as we talked about, if the NHANES study that I can link in the description below and put a screenshot here, 94% of American adults have some degree of poor metabolic health. And the elevated triglycerides are a reflection of poor fat oxidation and poor fat handling. So one of the easiest things that you can do, even if you recreationally exercise, is to aim to walk at a bare minimum of 8,600 steps per day. We reviewed the data from Bannock et al. In 2021, finding that for every 1,500 step increment off of 8,600, so if you just say walk 6,500 steps per day, your risk of dying from all causes increases by 15%. Now, if you cut that in half and go from 8,000 steps to 4,000 steps, that's like a 60% increased risk of dying from all causes. So I think a lot of people underestimate this tool. And all you have to do, I recently went to Europe, I went to France, I went to the UK. I saw virtually no overweight or obese people. Now, you might be saying, what's the food? Well, I mean, there is a lot of high carbohydrate food. I mean, look at French pastries and the desserts. There's baguettes, and everyone has like a piece of bread in their pocket or their backpack, especially travelers, but you still don't see the obesity. Now, what do you see that is very different, in my opinion, is walking. Many more people take public transportation in Europe. They walk a lot more than they do here in the US. Most days I was walking upwards of 18,000 steps per day, not on purpose, not trying to be some speed walker or ultimate walker or win any awards. You just naturally walk more. And you might find that when you walk more, it's so much easier to keep the weight off. And you have a little bit more buffer room in the foods that you are allowed to eat and not, suffering from the ramifications or the consequences of eating them. And so I think it's really important if you're trying to stay in shape this summer and get in shape for weddings or beach vacations or whatever it may be, that you ratchet up your step count and try to get 2,500 steps as a walking break and take these exercise snacks throughout the day. It's really effective. And we now have pretty good evidence from multiple different studies finding that exercise snacks and walking breaks and just having a high daily step count can increase fat oxidation by up to 20%. And so I think this is really important because many people here in the West, North America specifically, we go to the gym. We do our Peloton workouts in the morning, for example. We go to yoga, we go to Pilates, we do the treadmill at the gym. But we don't walk as much because we sit in our cars, we have long commutes, we have sedentary desk jobs, and the research is quite clear. If you're only walking between 2,000 and 4,000 steps per day, it's really suppressing your body's ability to mobilize stored fat from your fat cells and to use that in the form of energy. And then we start to see the triglycerides increase as a consequence of that. And I will tell you in my practice over the past, since 2006, when I started working with people and looking at labs and so forth, most people have high fasted and post-meal triglycerides, which in my opinion is a reflection of their exercise intolerance or their inability to burn fat during exercise. We're not going to talk about this study today, but Edward Coyle and colleagues did publish recently a follow-up study to this, finding that when they relegate people to just 2,000 or 4,000 steps per day in comparison to 8,000 steps per day, the low step count group and the moderate step count group, respectively 2,000 and 4,000 steps per day, had a significant suppression on exercised increased fat oxidation, meaning these people go to the gym, they do 60 minutes of exercise right in the zone 2, but they do not burn fat during that exercise session in comparison to individuals who walk 8,000 steps per day. So I know this sounds a little basic. Some of you probably walk 12 to 15,000 steps per day. Many of my friends in the health space are hitting that all the time and have rituals around meals. So just create some structure in your life so that after dinner, you just walk 2,000 to 3,000 steps. Just take the dogs out for a walk. And it's really enjoyable this time of year when the nights are long, you can get the sunset in your eyes. And, there's all this talk of low solar angle sunlight, how that's good for your circadian clock system and the intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells and all these different cells that affect your circadian clock system, which will then affect your sleep and then your hormones and it's all of this this interconnected web that is so important. So these tools sort of piggyback and support each other. They complement each other. So I just wanted to underscore this and share this study with you. The title, if you want to check it out in the show notes, is Daily Step Count and Postprandial Fat Metabolism. Again, Edward Coyle and his colleagues are publishing some really cool studies and just exemplifying what most people throughout the world outside of North America actually do. They just walk recreationally, walk to work, walk home from work, take a walk after meals. This has a really important effect. We now know this from clinical studies. And anecdotally, in looking at different populations, you go to Europe, you do not see the obesity that we see here. Yet paradoxically, you see high rates of smoking. In France specifically, and also in the UK, it seems like everyone smokes. I don't know if you've been to Europe lately. It's crazy. Most restaurants have ashtrays on every single dinner table, inside and outside. People are just smoking like crazy, yet their life expectancy and prevalence of heart disease and excess deaths from heart disease are much lower, even though they smoke way more. So in my opinion, that suggests to me it's probably multifactorial. The lifestyle factors, the social connections, the meaning, the purpose. They don't spray as much junk on their foods, Roundup specifically, and other herbicides, pesticides, and insecticides, but they walk much more. And so I think we can borrow something from this Mediterranean diet. Part of maybe why that diet is linked with good health outcomes may not be anything to do with the types of foods. It's more just the lifestyle, the exercise. And we've talked about blue zones before. One characteristic finding of all the blue zones is people just walk more. And that study, that research has been well documented. There's a lot of research to support that, my friends. So if you want to optimize your body composition, aim for a bare minimum of 8,600 steps per day. We have good research now to support that. So you can sprinkle that out, and I think it's even more effective if you do a little bit in the morning, a little bit midday, and a little bit in the evening. So that's it for today's show, my friends. Hopefully you enjoyed this content. Appreciate you sharing this video with a friend who may benefit from this, subscribing to the channel, and we'll catch you on a future one down the road.